Hey, Typology Tribe, this is Ian Morgan Cron, your host here on the podcast on which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. I am here in the Typology studio along with my dear friend, producer, engineer, Anthony Skinner. Anthony, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Ian, how are you?
I am really great because last night we had a bomb of a time.
Come on.
Last night, we went and saw two of our good friends, two great friends to Typology.
Yes.
We saw Johnny Swim perform.
That's right.
And we saw our dear friend, Drew Holcomb.
Guest surprise artist, Drew Holcomb.
Wasn't that awesome?
Yes.
There were about 10,000 people out on the green in Nashville to see these guys. So it was full of excitement, and we stayed out till about 1 o'clock in the morning.
And here we are.
But
yes.
we're energized,
We
aren't
are, yeah.
I want to tell folks and just remind them that Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors have a brand new record. It dropped this week.
That's right, Dragons.
It's called Dragons. And if you want a preview of that, you could actually go to the episode that we did with Drew and Ellie.
Oh, my word. Did he not lay it down that day?
They laid that
awesome.
song down that day, and it sounded like it was right off the record, right?
For real.
Everybody, please go on to Spotify or wherever you download your music and get Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors' new record, Dragons.
Yes.
It's killer.
Yep.
And they killed it. Johnny Swim, and he killed it.
As always.
Last night. Yeah, yes. Really, as always. Hey, I am so excited today. I'm pumped.
Woo-woo. Yes.
We have my friend Allison Fallon on the show.
Yeah.
And coming to us live from Los Angeles, California. Allie's a speaker.
Yes.
She is a coach. She's the author of 10 books, which I completely don't understand, including her memoir, Packing Light, Thoughts on Living Life with Less Baggage. Over the last 10 years, she has not only written prolifically, but has coached hundreds of authors to complete their creative projects through her in-person writing workshops, which I can commend fully, wholeheartedly. She has online courses. She does one-to-one support work. She's been featured on Huffington Post, Relevant Magazine, and Donald Miller's Storyline blog. She lives in LA. Yeah. Allie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Now, you are the greatest number on the Enneagram.
Do you say that to everyone?
No, yes. Just to this number.
Just to this number.
Yeah, I'm very specific.
Yes.
You are an Enneagram 4.
Yes, I am.
How did you figure that out?
For me, the easiest way to figure out my type was just reading through all the types. And it was pretty obvious to me once I read through each of the types that the 4 was me. The only trouble I had determining was I do have a really strong 3-wing. And so I went back and forth for a bit, wondering if I was maybe a 3 with a 4-wing or a 4 with a 3-wing. But for me, the deciding factor was that the 4 and the 3 would argue, but the 4 would always win out. So, like, if I walk in a room, for example, I can walk in a room and, like, do the schmooze thing and like, you know, really be charming and make people like me. But then I walk out of the room at the end of the night and I feel like the 4 is the one that wins. It's like, why'd you do that?
Right.
So.
Right. Well, yes. Why were you so inauthentic?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so tortured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so 4s typically want deep, authentic relationships, both with themselves and with other people. And so they're people who are concerned with issues like meaning. They're very fluent in the language of symbolism and aesthetics. And that's a way to help them understand and express the problem of human suffering. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, you've got a book out, Indestructible is the title. This is your latest book, right?
Yes. Yep.
Right. Indestructible, Leveraging Your Broken Heart to Become a Force of Love and Change. And I'm wondering if that's, indicative of this 4's way of being in the world, which is how do I make sense of human suffering? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the book is a very personal story for me. It's the story of leaving an abusive relationship and going through this divorce and completely like dismantling my faith perspective and trying to reimagine what it meant to be a person of faith and a believer in the world, and just completely reshaping my identity and trying to make sense of this thing that didn't make any sense to me at all. And so yeah, I mean, I think it fits perfectly with that concept of how a 4 moves through the world and always wants to go below the surface. It's, for me, it was more than just how do I, on a physical level, survive financially this transition in my life, and how do I survive practically, and where am I going to live, and all those questions that you're asking when you go through a massive life transition like that, and an unexpected transition. But it was also all the stuff that was happening under the surface, asking the questions about who am I and what makes me matter and why am I here. And actually, I mean, for me, the interesting part is what I discovered was that the writing process itself is part of how I wrestle with those questions. And it's changed the way that I teach writing too, because I've been working with authors for a decade, but it's changed the way that I think about writing and the way that I teach it. Because if writing is a way for us to wrestle with the big questions of life, then why shouldn't writing be a tool that literally anybody could use to wrestle with the big questions of life, whether or not they're ever going to publish their story?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been my experience as a writer. It's like, how do I articulate the interior landscape that I live with every day? And because I think 4s, man, they just have this driving need to be understood.
Yes, totally.
And so we're always explaining ourselves to people, which can drive people crazy after a while, because they're like, we get it. Stop talking about yourself, and it's not always narcissism, though I suppose it could be. It's really more, we want to be known.
Yes, that's really real. And I think to your point, you're right that it can come across as a bit narcissistic sometimes, maybe. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, what I hear from people who read what I write is, the feedback I hear is like, what you did was you named the human experience. You've named my human experience. So you've given language to something that I didn't have language to. And I think that's the gift of the 4 is it comes so naturally for us to go inside and ask questions and figure out how to explain how I feel about a thing, that then when we can present that to the world, it's almost like you're not just naming your own experience, you're naming the experience of being a human. And there are other people who can for sure benefit from having that language and having that access.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's like the art of creating. And it doesn't matter as a 4, you could be, writing books, you could be arranging flowers, you could be teaching yoga, you could be doing a whole host of things. But so much of what's going on underneath that is, how do I make the deepest connection with another human being so we both feel known, understood, and we're experiencing each other at the most profound spiritual level.
Yes, that resonates. I actually don't think I've heard it articulated that way, but it is how I move through the world, and it either really attracts people to me, or people are like, that's too much. I'm not, that's a lot. It's a lot for some people.
It is. It can be overwhelming. And I think part of the journey to health for a 4 is learning to pull back.
Yes.
And let relationships evolve in their own time and way, versus like hitting fast forward and saying, I want to be as close to you as most people would be at year 5 in the next 5 minutes.
So true.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
But you can do that. But you can, I think maybe for a 5, writing a book or even a paragraph or a song is like hitting fast forward. It's like saying, I want to get as deep and as close to you as I possibly can. So I'm going to write a song or a piece of prose or whatever to get there fast.
Yeah.
To find the spiritual connection super fast.
That resonates.
Do you know, yeah, right. So what's your subtype?
I think I'm 1-1, but the subtypes are more new to me, but I'm pretty sure that I'm the sexual or 1-1, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, knowing subtypes is hugely important for fours.
Okay.
Because there are two numbers on the Enneagram, 4s and 6s, and the subtypes of them are so different from each other that they really look like three different numbers.
Interesting.
And it's really those two numbers where knowing subtypes is the most important.
Okay.
So let me just tell you. So we'll find out. Let's just see if we can confirm if you're a 1-to-1. Okay. So if you're a self-preservation subtype 4, the name that's often given to them is reckless.
Okay.
Okay. And that type of 4 actually suffers themselves, right? In other words, they bear. Actually, that's not true. A better way to say it is they're long suffering.
Okay.
They're long suffering. So they bear suffering in silence in order to show that they're good enough by enduring pain.
Wow.
So these people tend to be confused with 3s and 7s.
Okay.
So for a long time, actually, I thought I was a 3 or a 7. I couldn't tell which, but when I read the self-preservation, I didn't really resonate with the underlying motivation.
Okay.
And then when I read I always kept thinking I must be a 4, but I don't sound like the way 4s get described. And then when I read self-pres 4, I was like, boom.
You're like, that's it.
Oh yeah, totally. I tend to be a person that kind of holds on to my own suffering and doesn't talk about it very much. But it is a way of proving my worth, my long suffering. And I have been engaged in kind of reckless behavior in the past or nonstop activity, which is common for a self-pres 4. And I do it to feel excited and energized. It's funny. I've been in a 12-step program for quite a long time. And really the substances that I used were always stimulants. I just, that was my thing, and I think that's so reckless.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be a chemical thing, right? So, all right. So the social 4 is called shame. And that's usually the 4 that everybody sort of has as a stereotype, right?
Okay.
They have a terrific focus on their own deficiencies, the feeling that there's something fatally flawed or fundamentally broken on the inside. They can become more addicted to their suffering. They will talk about their suffering with others. I don't do that as much as a social 4 will.
Okay.
So they'll talk about their suffering, and they never ever really quite believe that they can belong to the group.
Okay.
They always feel outside. Now, the 1-to-1 is called competition. That's the name for them. And they tend to express needs and feelings outwardly and intensely. They're very competitive. Mm-hmm. They're very ambitious.
Yes.
We often like to say that, and this is going to sound harsh, but take it in context, that the self-pres 4 suffers silently. The social 4 really suffers themselves, and the sexual or 1-to-1 4 makes others suffer. and I say that because, yeah, right. Because what they do is they project their own deficiencies onto other people, and then punish them for those deficiencies rather than themselves.
Wow. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is why a 1-to-1 4 is often confused with the 1-to-1 subtype of 8.
Okay.
They can be pretty aggressive.
Yeah, I definitely have an aggressive, competitive, ambitious. That's the part that I've always thought was the 3 showing itself. Is I'm very ambitious. I'm very goal oriented. I kind of can get in a silo a little bit and be like so determined to get to a goal that I lose track of the people around me.
Yeah, and I would also say that subtype of the 4, the 1-to-1 subtype, like when you go to a party, do you tend to gravitate toward the whole group, or do you find 2 or 3 people at the group and spend all your night with them?
The second one, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would be common of that 1-to-1 subtype.
Okay.
They'll find someone at a party or something like that, or a very small group, and they'll want to go very, very deep, very, very fast with that group.
Yes.
Right. I kind of do that, but I'm a little bit more open to being with the whole group.
I've had to train myself actually to, it's a challenge that I've given myself when I go to an event where there's many people there, not to get so focused on one conversation that I don't talk to everybody, or just sort of like to be a little bit more open to kind of staying closer to the surface and having touch points with many people in the room, because I find that to be very valuable, even though it's definitely not my first instinct. So.
Hey, Typology Tribe, I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors for helping us bring you what I hope is great content every week. Now, you all know, obviously, I'm a psychotherapist, and so I'm a big proponent of counseling. So, whether you feel like something is interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving certain goals, counseling is a great tool to help identify what those blocks are and then work through them. Yet, and I think probably many of you know this, finding a therapist can sometimes feel intimidating. Here comes the good news. BetterHelp offers online counseling at your own time and your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions plus text and chat with your therapist when it's convenient for you. That's huge, right? These are licensed professional counselors who specialize in things like depression, anxiety, stress, relationships, LGBT matters, trauma, and grief. BetterHelp has counselors available worldwide and have over 3,000 U.S. licensed therapists across all 50 states. And get this, if you're not satisfied with your counselor for any reason, you can request a new one at any time at no additional cost. Best of all, it's a truly affordable option. And as a special offer for Typology listeners, BetterHelp is offering 10% off your first month with the discount code Typology Podcast. So why not get started today? Go to BetterHelp.com/TYPOLOGYPODCAST. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you will love. Again, that's BetterHelp.com/Typology Podcast, TYPOLOGYPODCAST. BetterHelp.com/Typology Podcast. Check them out. And now, back to our guest. All right, so when we were talking earlier, we're sharing that there are sort of 2 places you've been thinking a lot about the application of the Enneagram. Yeah. One is in the arena of relationships, and then the other one is in the workplace leading teams. Let's talk for a moment about relationships and what it is about the 4 in relationships is sort of got your attention these days.
Well, I was married before, went through a divorce. This is what my book is about. And I'm about to get married again. My wedding's on November 8th. And I've been engaged since February, so 6 months or so, to a really wonderful man. We have a great relationship, actually. He's a 9. And we have a really good dynamic. I love our dynamic. But I think it's just interesting to have come out of a relationship that was very volatile. And I actually learned about the Enneagram when I was in my marriage, and the Enneagram helped me in some ways to understand what was going on. And then I also think that there maybe were were other dynamics happening that had nothing to do with the Enneagram. So I'm applying what I now know about the Enneagram in my relationship now, and I'm finding it really helpful for the most part. Yeah, but I would say the biggest rub in the relationship between the 4 and the 9, in my experience, has been that dynamic of the 4 wanting to go really, really deep, and the 9 and my fiance at points just being like, "Can we just chill? Can we just just hang?" and not have to have this be a really intense moment, you know? And the sense of wanting to accelerate the relationship, that has been true of us from the very beginning, that I've been the accelerator in the relationship. And he's been like this slow and steady, you know, like, let's play the long game. Let's take this slow. Let's really think things through. And he brings a real groundedness and steadiness to the relationship.
Okay, so I see, you know, lots of types, and I see certain patterns of relationship. So I often find 9s and 1s together. I find lots of 4s and 7s.
Okay.
Interestingly, and I see lots of 4s and 9s.
Okay.
I'm a 4 married to a 9. I can think of, so many friends of mine who are 4s married to 9s. So I think there's something in that connection that's like sort of worth talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that really works in a 4-9 relationship is that both parties are very empathic.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a wonderful thing. They do share deeply, and which is great. And the 9s create a space that is so welcoming and non-judgmental, which for a 4 who struggles with shame.
Yes.
So you're nodding your head.
It has transformed the way that I feel about myself. I mean, I really feel like being in this relationship in particular, because I was married to an 8. So the 4-8 dynamic was like so explosive. That being in this dynamic has helped me to settle into my body and into my life in a way that I've actually never experienced, or if I have, it was when I was a child. So I feel just like a sense of settledness that's so wonderful. And it helps me to kind of like, it helps me to do everything. It just helps me to live my life in a way that doesn't feel so frantic all the time. And that has been so healing for me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. You know, what happens, I think, between 4s and 9s is that 4s help 9s get in touch with this incredible, the instinct of energy in the world and to the aliveness in them that in lots of ways has fallen asleep.
Yes. Yep.
And so they can really wake that 9 up to in ways that are very powerful, right? Now, the 9 helps 4s to experience that complete acceptance we were just talking about, and to see how cool it is to be stable emotionally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. They're so good at saying, hey, it's going to be all right.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then, a question. With the dynamic between the 4 and the 9 of the 4 waking up that passion and intensity of the 9, how does as a 4, I'm wondering how I kind of moderate there. Like I can go overboard is what I'm saying. And in sort of like wanting to provoke and wake that up. And I'm wondering like how you know how to moderate that instinct.
Yeah, it's a great question. I for me, it's really about monitoring and regulating my way of relating to other people from moment to moment in conversation and just in the space, and recognizing, almost picking up on the cues of the other person, like I think I'm flooding them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And here's how I know with Annie when I'm flooding her. She glazes. Yeah. And I'll see her sometimes go into sort of checkout mode.
Yes.
Like her attention has gone diffuse.
Yes.
That she's not she's only listening to about 40% of what I'm saying.
Yep.
And when that happens, I know, okay, I'm picking up this cue. I'm monitoring what's going on. I need to pull back and honor difference here.
Yep.
So that's been my journey with it.
That's helpful.
Yeah. It's not easy. And, we have to extend a lot of grace to each other on this stuff. And I think it's important for the 4 to not judge the 9 for not being deep enough, for not wanting to go there all the time.
Yeah.
For not being concerned about the larger matters of life, the big existential questions What's the meaning of it all? Because the 9 is a little bit like, it's all good. I mean, and you're like, it's not all good.
I know. Yeah.
There's got to be more to this life than it's all good, and it's like, listen to what the wisdom of the 9 and kind of not be making demands on them. I can see why you're in your first marriage, and I'm treading carefully here, but for a 1-to-1 4 to be in relationship with an 8 who may be struggling with self-awareness could be very explosive.
Yeah. Yes, that's very explosive.
Yeah, it could be interesting. Now with a 4 and a 9, places where you could get into trouble. I'm doing marriage. I'm doing. Please do. We're doing premarital therapy
I
here.
We need some premarital counseling.
Okay, the clock's running, kids. It's only $250 an hour, so clock's on now, Allie.
Checks in the mail.
So, absolutely, that both of you are kind of prone to are sensitive to abandonment.
Okay.
So that's one area that 4s and 9s can kind of get into trouble. You're both withdrawing numbers, meaning that when stuff gets a little rough, you'll withdraw from each other.
That's true.
And then things don't get solved.
Yeah.
So is that, you're just nodding your head?
Yeah, that's really true for us. I mean, I've joked about it that like we don't really fight. We just tiptoe around each other. Like when we both get frustrated, it'll be like tiptoeing for a half a day. And then we're kind of like, are you good? Are you good? Like, it's not, there's no like, our fights are not combative. They're and I will say, thankfully, like we also both are really committed to the growth process. So we don't let issues linger for months at a time. We do address them. Both of us do. I would say I'm the first usually to be like, this needs to be talked about. But even if I didn't do that. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's that 1-to-1 8 energy.
Okay.
So you're going to be less of a withdrawal type than the other two.
Okay.
I mean, you're still, I think, in that withdrawal space, but after a while, you will not tolerate it as long as the other two will.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
You'll start to pursue rather than withdraw.
Yes, that's true. I let it linger for a bit, and then I do jump in.
Yeah, I think one thing over the years that 9s and 4s struggle with is that the even keeledness of the 9 can start to feel a little too white bread for the 4.
Okay.
The 4 is like, I just want so much more passion. The 9 just seems a little beige. Right? You know what I mean?
I do.
And then the 4 is like, can we get some more colors in here? like cack.
Yeah.
You're laughing.
Yeah,
You're laughing.
Yeah. So how do you cope with that in your 4-9 dynamic?
Well, what's been interesting is that was problematic for us for a while. And frankly, the thing that kind of turned that around was our going through a really rough season with one of our children that forced both of us into a level of internal work that brought so many more colors into the relationship.
Wow.
And it woke my wife up in ways that were really beautiful, painful and difficult. But what emerged was a palette of new emotional and colors that hadn't really been there for a while. And it has been an amazing blessing to my marriage.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it's funny. Really, I sense really that with not just my fiance who's a 9, but with other 9s I know. I feel like I have this sense that there's so many more layers and so much more depth than they are presenting to you. Like a 9 will be in a conversation and everybody's jumping in and contributing to the conversation and sort of talking over the top of each other in a group setting, let's say. And the 9 is just kind of sitting there. And I always get this sense with my fiance or with a couple of other 9s that I know. I'm always like, what you're thinking in your head right now is one of the most interesting things that's being considered at this table. And you're just the one you're just not saying it.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly right. The 9 is perched up at the crown of the Enneagram. And what some teachers teach is that, every number essentially falls asleep to itself. At some level, we all fall asleep to our true nature.
Yeah.
The 9 at the perched up there, probably more than other numbers, they're in a deeper sleep. And so what, there's kind of a cascading effect or a waterfall effect where they're up on the perch and that tendency of the human being to fall asleep to themselves is what we experience as the 9's energy flowing down the Enneagram on either side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And what I tell 9s is, don't be discouraged by that. Know that when you wake up, in some ways, it is more powerful than it is for other types.
Yes.
And wonderful.
I really see that in my fiance. I'm like, he's such a 9s. You don't think of 9s as being like leading a company. He has his own company. He's such a leader, and people respond to him. Even he doesn't have to push people to respond to him. The response is like, people are drawn to him. They just want to do what he asks them to do. It's just without doing much coercion at all. He can lead a team of 25 people. So yeah, that really rings true to me about him too. Well,
and what I love about 4s in their leadership, about 9s in their leadership style is they're so inclusive.
They are.
There's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing autocratic about a 9. An 8 can be autocratic, a 3 can be autocratic, and sort of, pound the agenda through. But the 9 is like, how do I bring everybody along?
Yes, totally.
You know what I mean?
It's so wonderful.
It's really like a very, very cool thing.
It is.
Hey everybody, I want to tell you about my friend Michael Cusick and Restoring the Soul. One of the lessons I've learned, Anthony,
tell me,
is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute hour, or even from the typical weekly sessions. And this is why some people, even though they may have a great therapist, can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for months or even years. Some folks, they never really get anywhere if they're just going on a weekly basis. They don't make any progress.
That's right.
So this is why I'm such a fan and a believer in the intense counseling process at Restoring the Soul in Colorado. Restoring the Soul was created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick, who helps couples and individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Michael and his team know that sometimes you can't wait months or years, Anthony.
That's right.
To get to the bottom of an issue or experience breakthrough. So I want you to get a hold of Michael and his team. If you really feel like you're in a rut and you can't wait months or years, you can call Restoring the Soul for a free consultation. That's 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can jumpstart your journey or launch you to a whole new place in life. Make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called, Anthony.
Hey, 5 ways unaddressed trauma may be derailing your relationships.
And now, back to our guest. All right, so you're in business.
Yes.
Like you're a business person. And this is kind of like it's wonderful because it pushes against the stereotype that people have of 4s, and which is, chances are they're always running around the fields considering the lilies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they probably don't make great leaders because they're sort of quirky, and they're probably not very ambitious, and they're kind of so lost in their feelings that they don't get anything done. And it's like, okay, that's a stereotype.
Yeah.
It's kind of true because most stereotypes contain elements of truth. But frankly, 4s can be tremendous business leaders.
Oh, I'm so encouraged to hear you say that, because I feel like even I've had my own stereotype about myself, that I've been in business. I've been running my own business for the last 10 years, but it's really only been the last 3 that I've had a team working underneath of me. And I have so many times thought to myself, maybe I'm just not built for this. Maybe I was just supposed to be an artist and I should just go back to writing my own books. But then there's also this drive and this intensity and an ambition in me that has, and I really, really enjoy leading a team. I really do. So anyway, it's encouraging to hear you say that.
Well, here's how 4s typically lead in business.
Okay.
Force of personality, number 1. Right? They lead by force of personality. Now that can be wonderful and inspiring and motivating to people to pursue the uncompromised ideal. So fours think to themselves, okay, this is who we are and this is what we're doing. This is the ideal. And sometimes what a four has to learn is you have to compromise.
Okay.
On the ideal.
Yeah.
And that is anathema to the four usually.
Yeah.
I will not compromise, and so I laugh sometimes with the four. I'll say, well, sometimes you can't print a brochure that costs $40 a piece.
Yeah, it's true. Even though it looks beautiful and everybody really love it.
That's right.
Exactly. It's like, you know what? You got to let that go sometimes. It's like, that's not going to work. So force of personality, it would be one way. I think another way that a four leads at work is they really inspire people to be authentic. Mm. They have no energy for people who are inauthentic at work.
That is very true. Very true. Yes.
And I there's a whole host of other ways that fours do really, really great work. What's been your experience? Like, what has worked for you as a four, as a leader?
Well, the personality piece that you mentioned that rings really true for me. That's been very true. I do a great job usually in the beginning of a project or something we're working on as a team, getting the team really inspired. I do have that strong thread of idealism, so I set the bar really high. It comes out sometimes as perfectionism, but it gets people excited. I can cast the vision and really gather people around a vision, an idea, a dream, set the objectives, set people into motion. And then where it breaks down for me as a leader, the struggle that I've had is in the day-to-day, like even personally keeping myself motivated. You, as a four, you kind of ride these waves of inspiration. So there are days when I feel like I almost feel like I could work for 16 hours and never get tired and I don't need to sleep, but who needs to eat? This is so fun. And then there are other days where you are like, I'm just not feeling it. So it's harder to get motivated. And then how do you motivate a team when you're not even yourself motivated in the day-to-day stuff? That's just, it's just emailing and to-do lists and things have to get done. And as a four, you start to feel a little bit, I think, at least I do. I start to feel a little confined or trapped by the day-to-day-ness of it. It's like, this is boring. Let's go on a trip. So I've had to work through my own resistance to the ordinary in order to work with the team that the work we're doing is, of course, inspiring, but it's also ordinary because it's work.
Yeah. Sometimes it's routine.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not related to some higher transcendent thing, which is so important to fours at work.
Yeah.
It's got to have a higher purpose.
Totally.
And when you're like, okay, we got to call the email list, that does not feel like it's, part of something transcendent.
Totally.
Right. And you guys we also have to watch out for our personality, which, is how we lead, is by force of personality. Doesn't intimidate people.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Right. It can be a little overwhelming. How do you make decisions as a four?
Well, this is interesting. I fluctuate back and forth between, when you said the word reckless at the beginning, there was a part of me that resonated with that, even though I don't think I'm the self-pres type. But because I go through phases where I make decisions very quickly and impulsively and take big risks. And then sometimes those risks don't work out. And then it will shake my confidence a bit. And then I go through a phase after, usually, where I am much slower to make a decision and I get a little bit like waffly. Like I'm like, should I do this or should I do this? Or no, I should do this. No, I should do this. And then I'll get stuck in a rut. But usually then I get out of the rut after a bit and then I start making, my first impulse, I would say, is to make decisions quickly and impulsively. And I'm a risk taker. I really do. I enjoy the thrill of the risk.
Yeah. And I think that's not atypical of fours.
Okay.
And I think one of the ways that fours tend to make decisions is on the basis of intuition.
That's true.
like I gotta, so I'm intuiting that this is what is the right next move. And of course that scares the bejesus out of the data people.
Yeah, it totally, that's real.
Right?
Yep.
So, all right. So how are you right now using the Enneagram to enlarge your soul and help you on the journey to wholeness?
Oh, such a good question. Well, I think the biggest thing for me is really getting curious about what motivates other people. Like, I think as a 4, it's not hard for me to be curious about what motivates me and what's going on inside of me and what's causing me to do the things I'm doing or make the choices I'm making, or what the thoughts are in my head, what I'm feeling, what's going on with me. Like, I can pretty quickly and easily articulate that at any given moment. But I'm learning as a leader in my business, and then in really wanting to build a strong relationship with my fiance, and we really want to start a family. So I'm thinking also about being a parent, that in all those areas, in order to do any of that well, I have to be as curious about other people as I am about myself. So in working relationships, I think I'm trying to pause and think, like, what is motivating this person to act this way? And can I get curious about their interior landscape and ask questions and really seek to understand them as well as I understand myself? And I think it's, in most cases, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in that at all. But I will say in most cases that it's really working for me. Like, when I can coach myself to do that in my relationship to Matt, he responds very positively. And when I do it in my working relationships with the team I have working for me, they seem to come to life, and they do really feel understood and cared for. And there seems to be a camaraderie where the contribution comes easier on their end. Like, they feel really great about what they're contributing to the team.
Well, I love what Thich Nhat Hanh says. He says the beginning of love is understanding.
That's good.
And it's not feelings. It's not, all that stuff. It's really about understanding, in particular, the suffering of the other.
Yeah.
What is it where is their suffering? Where have they carried it for a long time? And of course, that is not always how a very young or a 4 that isn't very self-aware, they're too much focused on their own suffering.
Yeah.
And believing that their suffering is unique and actually worse than the suffering of anybody else.
Totally.
So when a 4 wakes up, as you have, and they begin to say, I need to be in touch with how other people feel and what their suffering has been, and be able to listen to it and connect to it and have empathy for it, that's just a sign of real health. Real health. Well, Allie, your latest book, Indestructible.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Leveraging your broken heart to become a force of love and change. That's available on Amazon right now. And you can be found on Instagram at Allie Fallon, right?
Yep.
ALLYFALLON. And on Twitter at Miss Allie Fallon.
Yes.
And what else do you want people to know about you?
What else do I want people to know about me? I mean, I teach writing workshops. It's probably one of my favorite things that I get to do. And I teach workshops to people who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves writers, to help people use writing as a tool to better understand themselves and the world that they live in. So you can find out more about the writing workshops at findyourvoice.com. And I'm hosting...
How did you get that URL? How did you get that URL?
Just, followed my intuition. That's how I got it.
Man,
Asked
give me
the
some
right
of that.
people at the right time. Yeah. So...
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Al, we've just loved having you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I'm going to go tell my fiance everything that I just learned.
I know, man. Nines and fours got some serious mojo today, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Totally.
Love it.
So good. Well, Al, we love you. We love your work. When you're next in Nashville, will you stop in and spend some time
I
with
would
us?
love it, of course. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thanks to both of you.
Thanks, Allie.
Oh, yeah. Hey, everybody. Don't forget the words of the great Oscar Wilde. Be yourself.
Everybody else is already taken.
Love ya.